There wasn't any more time. I stopped hesitating. My jacket hit the pavement. I grabbed a thick wooden stick from next to a trash can and charged. A few local punks were squatting on the curb, not far away. Their backs were to me as they smoked and laughed, shooting the breeze. One of them went down hard from a single blow of the stick. I kicked another one clean over. The last two jumped to their feet, the glowing tips of their cigarettes tracing crimson arcs in the twilight. Motherfucker, the one with the bleach blonde hair, grabbed a loose brick from the roadside. I sidestepped the clumsy swing, bringing the stick down hard on his knee. The crack of bone mixed with a scream, shockingly loud in the narrow alley. The guy in the cheap loafers turned to run. I kicked over a rental scooter, sending him sprawling to the ground. I didn't stop, moving between them, swinging the stick. One hit for each of them, the motions vicious and precise. A crowd had already gathered nearby, some with their phones out, recording. I heard someone say to call the cops. I smiled. Looking right at the camera-wielding audience, I gave a little wave. This was exactly what I wanted. By the time the sirens wailed in the distance, I could hear my own ragged breathing. I dropped the blood-streaked stick and noticed a long, shallow cut across the palm of my hand. The first patrol cops to arrive were on motorcycles. I raised my hands in compliance. "Get me in cuffs now," I yelled at them. Before the younger cop could even speak, the bleach-blonde kid struggled to his feet and screamed at me, "You're dead, you asshole. I'm gonna fucking kill you." Before the cop could react, I lunged forward. My foot slammed into the kid's stomach. He staggered back and crumpled to the ground again. At the same time, I was tackled to the pavement by the police. My hands were wrenched behind my back. As the handcuffs clicked shut, I heard a collective, stifled gasp from the crowd. More squad cars arrived, lights flashing. They suspected it was a gang fight. The punks, their faces a mask of aggrieved innocence, tried to explain they were just hanging out, having a smoke. That I had jumped them for no reason. "What are you waiting for?" I shouted. "Get me down to the station." The young cop holding me down grunted, telling me to shut up. The lights in the interrogation room were a harsh, sterile white. I didn't wait for the officers to ask. I confessed to everything. I attacked them without provocation. It was deliberate. Just book me and put me in a cell. In a holding cell, I slid down the wall and closed my eyes. I am a tragic hero of this novel. The plot has now reached the critical night. In the original story, right at this moment, the second male lead, Mark Peterson, and my fiancée, Jessica Reed, are at the office transferring funds. They use my key card, my fingerprint to unlock the computer, my forged signature, and company authorization to wire the money. All the evidence points to me being there. But now I'm here, in a police holding cell. The cops are my alibi. Who could possibly refute it? I almost laughed, remembering the scene in the original story where the judge asks me, "Where were you at the time of the crime?" And all I could offer was a pale, weak denial. This time, my answer will be the police station. The squeal of the holding cell's steel door cut through the night, interrupting my thoughts. "Ethan Hayes, someone's posted your bail." Chloe rushed in, her eyes swollen and red. The moment she saw me, she threw her arms around me. "Ethan!" Her voice trembled, and her whole body shook as she held me tight. My father followed her in, his face a thundercloud. "Ethan, do you have any idea what you're doing?" Chloe quickly moved to stand in front of me. "Dad, Ethan, move." He pushed her aside and raised his hand to slap me. I stood my ground, unmoving, but the sting of the slap never came. My father's hand hung in the air, shaking violently. "Ah, hell," he sighed, turning away and instantly changing his demeanor. He forced a strained smile for the officer behind him. "Officer, I am so sorry. I apologize for all the trouble. Ethan has always been a good kid, never been in a fight in his life. I don't know if something set him off, but we're willing to pay for all the damages and come to an understanding with the parents of the injured boys." I gently pushed Chloe away and looked my father straight in the eye. "Dad, don't pay them anything yet." My father froze. He lowered his voice to a hiss. "Are you insane? If the medical reports for those punks come back serious." Hearing my words, Chloe's expression also filled with confusion and alarm. Seeing their panic, I felt a sharp pang in my chest, like a knife scraping against my heart. In the original story, my imprisonment was the reason my parents couldn't hold their heads up around friends and family. My father sold off his assets. Chloe sold the inheritance her mother had left her, all just to compensate my boss and try to reduce my sentence. In the end, both my parents died with unresolved grief. Chloe cried herself blind before I was released from prison. So this time, I had to stay here. It was the only way to change the script, the only way to protect them. The police had already processed the bail paperwork and were waiting for my signature. I gently pulled my hand from Chloe's grasp and took a step back, my back hitting the cold wall. Dad, Chloe, you two go home first. My voice was quiet but firm. I can't leave. You always taught me, if you do something wrong, you own it. You face the music. My father's face went pale. Do you know what you're saying? I do. I met his gaze directly. You made me take all those self-defense classes to protect myself, not to be a bully who preys on the weak. Since I beat those guys up for no reason, I have to face the consequences. I'm willing to pay for the damages and serve the full 24-hour hold. This is my punishment for what I did. Chloe suddenly grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold. Ethan, did something happen? Did someone provoke you? I looked at her bloodshot eyes, and a wave of anguish washed over me. In the original story, this sweet, foolish girl ran herself ragged all over the city trying to find evidence to clear my name, and in the end, Chloe, listen to me. I gently tousled her hair. Go home and wait for me. An officer standing nearby grew impatient. The paperwork's done. Are you leaving or not? My father's temper finally snapped. Ethan Hayes, you are coming home with me today. He turned to the officer. Officer, I think my son is having some kind of mental breakdown. We need to take him to see a doctor. No, I'm not going. I yelled, violently shoving Chloe away from me. I assaulted them. I broke the law. I need to go to jail. I started acting like a madman, hysterically pounding on the wall. I want to go to jail. I have to atone for my sins. My father and Chloe were terrified by my outburst. An officer immediately rushed over to restrain me. Calm down. I wrestled free and lunged for the interrogation table, sweeping a stack of files onto the floor. Ethan Hayes, what are you doing? The officer shouted. My father grabbed my arm. Are you crazy? That's assaulting an officer. I put on a deranged expression. I don't care. I want to be locked up. Chloe burst into tears and threw her arms around my waist. Ethan, please don't do this. I shook her off. I want to confess. I yelled at the cops. I have other crimes to confess to. The officers immediately grew alert. What crimes? I skipped out on a breakfast bill last week. The officer's expression shifted from serious to bewildered. That's it. There's more. I racked my brain for something else. The day before yesterday, I secretly browsed some sketchy online poker sites in my room. The officer's look went from bewildered to completely unimpressed. You got anything a little more explosive? Does getting into flame wars with trolls in political subreddits count? That just makes you a patriot, the officer said, shrugging with a deadpan expression. My father was shaking with rage. You, officer. I turned back to the cop. According to state law, a charge of disorderly conduct and assault like this carries a mandatory minimum hold of 24 hours, right? The officer eyed me suspiciously. You seem to know the law pretty well. Then please enforce it. I stood up straight. I refuse bail. My father finally exploded. Ethan Hayes, you are coming home with me today. He started to physically drag me toward the door. I threw myself backward, deliberately slamming into the wall with a loud thud. Help! Police brutality. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The officer's faces paled. What are you talking about? Nobody touched you. Chloe was white as a sheet. Ethan, stop saying things like that. I continued my charade. I want to file a complaint. I want internal affairs. I want to see your captain. I broke the law. I want to be detained. You can't just let me walk out of here. The police were clearly agitated by my behavior. Fine. You want to stay for 24 hours? Be my guest, one of them snapped. He turned to my father, his face stern. Mr. Hayes, your son is refusing bail. At this point, our hands are tied. We have to follow procedure. My father stomped his foot in frustration. Officer, he's not normally like this. The kid must be having a breakdown. Yes, follow procedure, I shouted, terrified the cops would take my dad's suggestion and I'd end up in a psych evaluation instead of a cell. The officers exchanged glances, but ultimately they followed protocol and led me back to the interrogation room. I sat in the chair, silent. I crossed my arms and fiddled with my fingers, my eyes darting occasionally to the clock on the wall. Seeing me clam up, the police grew restless. A younger officer waved dismissively toward the door. All right, since the subject is refusing bail, the hold continues. The family can go home. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but Chloe took his arm. Dad, let's just go home for now. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but my heart ached seeing Chloe's swollen eyes. Chloe, go home and get some rest, I said softly. She gave me a long, searching look that broke my heart. For a second, I was tempted to abandon the entire plan. But I couldn't. I had to see this through. Ethan, I'll come get you tomorrow. As I watched them leave, I leaned back against the cold chair and exhaled deeply. But I didn't hear the sound of their footsteps receding down the hall. Curious, I turned to look at the door to the interrogation room. Chloe had collapsed onto a bench in the hallway, looking completely lost. My dad stood beside her, chain-smoking, shaking his head every so often as if lost in thought. I closed my eyes and started counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Time had never felt so slow. Every passing second was a small victory. When the clock on the wall hit 9 p.m. on the dot, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I suddenly stood up. My entire demeanor had changed. The two officers stared at me, confused. Officers, I plead guilty to the disorderly conduct and assault charges from earlier. I'm ready to sign the paperwork now. I walked calmly over to them, took the pen, and signed my name. You can take me to the holding cell now. I'm tired. My father started to say something, his finger pointed at me, but I didn't look at him. The older officer sighed. Mr. Hayes, I suggest you both go home and come back for him tomorrow. Ethan's situation is unique. Since he's admitted guilt, it's probably best to let him stay the night. Chloe stood up and gave me one last, deep look. She took my father's arm. The two of them watched as I was led down the long corridor. It was the same cell as before, and again, I was the only one in it. The officer locked the door, muttering nut job. As his footsteps faded away, I finally let myself relax. Now, all I had to do was wait. The next morning, the police station's parking lot was crowded with cars. I hadn't slept a wink, and my eyes were sore, but my mind was sharper than ever. When the steel door of the holding cell was pulled open, I could hear my own heart pounding. My parents and Chloe, who had come to pick me up, froze in the hallway. I was led back to the same interrogation room. This time, a new group of stern-faced detectives sat across from me. Ethan Hayes, your employer reported a crime this morning. Starting at 9 p.m. last night, a series of illegal transfers were made from the Sterling and Virotech corporate accounts, totaling $15 million. The man speaking was an older detective with a square jaw and the heavy presence of a career cop. A badge from the city's Economic Crimes Division hung around his neck. He had none of the casual demeanor of last night's patrolman. I looked up, a small smile playing on my lips. Officer, you have to be kidding me. $15 million? Before I could finish, the lead detective slammed a thick file down on the table. All of the transfers were initiated from your work computer. Security footage shows that you were the only person who entered or exited the office last night. We found your fingerprints on the computer, your security key was used, and we have documents with your signature. The evidence is overwhelming. Are you going to confess or not? The room fell silent. The older detective exchanged a look with the younger one beside him. In the original story, the security footage also showed my face, which was one of the reasons I couldn't defend myself. I quickly replayed the details of the plot in my head. A security key. What was that about? Knock, knock, knock. A sharp rap on the door broke the silence. A female officer entered, followed closely by Mark Peterson and Jessica Reed. Outside the door, I could see my parents and Chloe peering in, their faces etched with anxiety. They looked exhausted. They must have been up all night, too. Jessica's face was a mask of sorrow. She spoke with feigned resolve. Officers, I have to report something. She glanced at my parents, her voice trembling. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I didn't want to have to say this, but Ethan has been on a downward spiral, and I can't cover for him anymore. For the past 6 months, he's been gambling. He's lost all of our savings. I've talked to him so many times, and he always promised he'd stop. He begged me not to tell you. Now he's in deep with loan sharks. That's impossible. Chloe's voice was sharp. My brother would never do something like that. Jessica wiped a tear from her eye and took out her phone, playing an audio recording. My own voice, slurred and indistinct as if I were half asleep, filled the room. Jessica, just give me a little more time. I'm about to get a huge sum of money, enough to pay off all the loan sharks. Then we won't have to worry about anything anymore. My face hardened. Why was that my voice? I had absolutely no memory of saying that. Did I miss a detail from the original story? My parents' and Chloe's faces turned ashen, their lips trembling as they stood there, speechless. Just then, Mark Peterson also pulled out his phone. Detectives, these are my chat logs with Ethan. He's been asking me for weeks about when our clients were scheduled to make payments, pushing me to collect on outstanding invoices. Mark was the director of sales and Jessica's direct supervisor. He showed them screen after screen of messages, all from me. I couldn't believe it. These were routine conversations. As the company's CFO, it was my job to push sales to collect receivables when our cash flow was tight. Suddenly, a specific screenshot was pushed in front of my face. The profile picture was mine, but I had never sent this message. I stared at the image. Me? Mark, I think I left my security key in your office. Can you bring it with you when you come over later? Mark, this thing? Below it was a picture of a silver, USB-style metal device. Me, yes, that's it. Hold on to it for me. It's really important. What is this? I couldn't help but ask. Ethan, are you still going to play dumb? Mark looked at me with an expression of pure disappointment. A detective sneered and produced the silver USB drive. Ethan Hayes, are you really not going to admit it at this point? Our tech guys have already analyzed this. It's a hardware key for your offshore money laundering platform. It contains a complete record of all your transactions on the platform. I don't know if you were careless or just arrogant, leaving the key at the scene of the crime. A dead silence fell over the interrogation room. My father swayed on his feet, holding onto the wall to stay upright. My mother clutched her chest, silent tears streaming down her face. Chloe suddenly rushed toward me, grabbing the front of my shirt. Ethan, say something. This isn't true, right? Her nails dug into my skin. Her eyes were completely bloodshot. I looked into her frantic eyes, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Before I could explain, Jessica spoke again. There's also this. She produced another USB drive. I found this in Ethan's desk drawer this morning. It's full of information on bank accounts he opened overseas. An officer quickly plugged the drive into a laptop. The contents were projected onto a screen in the room. It was a dense list of bank account details. The account holder for every single one, over 100 of them, was listed as Ethan Hayes. This can't be. My father's voice trembled. My mother was now leaning heavily on Chloe to stay standing. I don't believe it. Someone is trying to frame my brother. Chloe suddenly lunged for the laptop. Mark grabbed her and held her back. Chloe, I know this is hard to accept. Get off me. Chloe snarled like a cornered animal. My brother would never do this. Jessica, still wiping away tears, said, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I don't want to believe it either. But the evidence is right there. I just never thought Ethan would take such a huge risk for money. I can't believe he would commit a crime. It's all my fault. I should have seen the signs and stopped him sooner. The lead detective narrowed his eyes. Ethan Hayes, do you have anything to say for yourself? I watched the whole performance in silence. Mark and Jessica were flawless. Even though the plot had deviated from what I expected, every piece of evidence they presented was perfectly interwoven, creating a nearly airtight case. All of it pointed directly at me. I was once again the criminal who had stolen $15 million. My father suddenly stormed over to me and raised his hand. Crack! A loud, sharp slap echoed through the room. My face burned. You animal! My father yelled, his body shaking. How could our family produce such a disgrace? My mother rushed over, crying, and pulled at his arm. Honey, don't do this. Chloe stood in front of me. Dad, we don't know the whole story yet. What's not to know? My father roared. The evidence is all right here. He turned to the police. Detectives, do what you have to do. Our family doesn't have a son like this. My heart felt like it was being torn apart, but I knew this outburst was just a measure of his pain. I narrowed my eyes. I rubbed my burning cheek. I was just about to start my explanation, and I had to take a slap first. I guess I had been a little too patient. I rubbed my stinging cheek, and, to everyone's surprise, I started to laugh. The entire room fell silent, staring at me. I turned to Mark and Jessica and began to applaud slowly. Hori, that was truly a magnificent performance. I have to ask, do the two of you have any more evidence? If you do, you should probably present it all at once. It will be pretty awkward for me if I refute all this, and then you just pull out something new. The lead detective slammed his hand on the table. Ethan Hayes, what is this attitude? I slowly stood up, my gaze sweeping over Mark and Jessica like a blade. Detectives, since they presented so much evidence against me, I suppose it's time for me to prove my innocence. I turned to my father and Chloe, giving them a reassuring smile. Dad, Mom, Chloe, don't worry. Last time, my denials were useless. But now, things were different. First, I said, pointing to the clock, let me confirm the time of the incident. The detective frowned, checking his notes. The transfers began last night at 9 p.m. sharp and continued until 9:47 p.m. A wide grin spread across my face. I couldn't help it. The detective slapped the table again, his face stern. What are you smiling about? This is a serious matter. Saw the... I was just thinking of something funny. Mark's face paled slightly. Jessica's fingers twisted together in her lap. Detectives, I'd like to ask a question. At the time of the crime last night, where was I? The detective flipped through his notes impatiently. At 9 p.m. last night, you were at the office, of course. The security footage shows. I saw Chloe's face break into a relieved smile. She had already figured it out. Wrong. I slammed my own hand on the table, the sound exploding in the quiet room. You could have heard a pin drop. The person in that security footage wasn't me. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Mark snapped. I said it wasn't me, and that means it wasn't me. The color drained from Mark's face. Jessica's fingers dug so hard into her palm that her knuckles turned white. I gave a cold smile and turned back to the police, speaking each word with deliberate clarity. Last night, at 9 p.m. sharp, I was handcuffed to a chair in this very interrogation room. There are security cameras everywhere, and every single officer on duty last night can testify to that. The room was utterly silent. The lead detective's expression froze. He shot a look at another officer, who immediately rushed out of the room. Furthermore, I added, stretching my shoulders, at 8 p.m. last night, I was in a street fight. The responding officers had their body cameras running the entire time. The location of that fight is an hour-and-a-half drive from the office, so there's no way I could have made it there to transfer the funds. The entire time, I never had an opportunity to leave or be swapped out. I was in handcuffs in view of a police body camera until I was brought back to this station. I have been in custody ever since, until you pull me out of the holding cell just now. I gave him a pleasant smile and enunciated every word. So, let me ask, is that a solid enough alibi for you? The interrogation room was dead quiet. Mark's face was ashen, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. Jessica's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white, her lips trembling without a sound. The lead detective shot up from his chair. Give me the body cam footage from last night's patrol. Another young officer sprinted out of the room. My parents stood frozen, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion, and then to dawning joy. That's right. Ethan was locked up last night. It couldn't have been him. Chloe's eyes lit up, and she gripped my arm tightly. Ethan, I knew it. I patted her hand reassuringly and turned my attention back to Mark and Jessica. Now you two. It's your turn to talk. Mark puffed out his chest, trying to look composed. Ethan, don't you dare try to slander us. I chuckled, pointing a finger at him. See? You're getting defensive again. I haven't even said anything yet. What are you so worked up about? Is it because you just committed perjury? That's bullshit. Everything I said was the truth. It just so happens that all the evidence pointed to you. Mark blustered, his voice righteous. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I was wrong to suspect you. It looks like someone is trying to frame you, Jessica said, quickly changing her tune. She adopted a thoughtful expression. Do you think it could be our boss? Maybe he embezzled the money himself and is trying to pin it on you. Yes, that's a possibility, Mark chimed in, catching on immediately. I almost cursed it out loud. I had never seen two people so shameless. They were obviously trying to redirect the police's attention so they could make a run for it. They never expected me to have such an ironclad alibi. Slap. I slammed my hand on the table again, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the room. Everyone jumped. Jessica, Mark, do you really think these detectives are idiots? I turned to the lead detective, my tone suddenly respectful. Sorry about that, detective. I'm not angry at you, just at the situation. I looked back at the two of them, a playful smirk on my face. Oh, it's definitely a frame-up, I said. But it's absolutely not our boss. Are you two still trying to act? You said I have a gambling problem, but I have no such vices. You said I took out loans from loan sharks and lost all our savings. I bet the money in our joint account has already been transferred out by you, hasn't it? So tell me, who should be the prime suspect here? And all this fake evidence, you're the ones who brought it in. Who does that make look suspicious? They both looked like they wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Now that my name was cleared, every part of their story was riddled with holes. The lead detective's eyes scanned them, full of suspicion. Jessica started to say. Shut up. I cut her off, my voice booming. Detectives, allow me to offer some suggestions for your investigation. I'm sure you can verify all of this. The criminal, wearing a mask of my face, probably made appearances in public places, maybe even at casinos or loan shark offices, and definitely at our company. After all, you have to be thorough when you're building a case, or the evidence doesn't hold up. You can check the security footage for me and for the imposter. As long as I have an alibi, you'll know that person wasn't me. And, of course, you could always check if your current suspect have an alibi. I'm not saying Mark is a suspect, of course. I don't have any proof of that. Mark's Adam's apple bobbed. Sweat was now pouring down his forehead. Jessica's hands were clenched so tightly they were shaking. The lead detective narrowed his eyes, his sharp gaze darting between the two of them. Interesting, he said slowly. Mr. Hayes, you have a very clear line of thought. I shrugged. I was the one being framed. I figured I should say a few words in my own defense. No, this is impossible. You definitely had an accomplice. This is all just a smokescreen. Mark suddenly erupted, pointing a trembling finger at me. Ethan, stop playing innocent. You probably had a partner do the job while you got yourself thrown in a holding cell. Damn, Mark wasn't a complete idiot. That was a plausible scenario. I thought for a moment. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. In that case, let me ask you, were you at 9 o'clock last night? Mark froze, looking like a rooster caught by the neck. Jessica quickly jumped in. Mark was with me all of last night. We can vouch for each other. I shook my head. Jessica, if I remember correctly, I'm your fiancée, right? We haven't even broken up yet, and you're already spending the entire night with Mark? Have you no shame, you bitch? I swung my arm, and my hand connected with her cheek in a loud slap. A bright red mark instantly appeared on her face. My action stunned my parents and Chloe. I had never, ever laid a hand on Jessica before. The way they looked at her began to change, their gazes turning sharp and cold. Jessica clutched her face, tears instantly welling in her eyes. Ethan, you hit me? Damn right I hit you, you cheating tramp. I grabbed her by the collar and pulled her close. You were with Mark at 9 o'clock last night. What were you doing? Getting a room. You're making that up, she shrieked. Mark rushed forward to pull me off her. Let her go. I twisted and drove my elbow straight into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. Mark staggered back, clutching his face as blood streamed through his fingers. Officer, he's assaulting us. Mark howled. The lead detective watched with cold indifference. Serves you right. I shoved Jessica back into a chair and loomed over her. Jessica, you think I don't know? You and Mark have been screwing around for ages, just waiting for the right moment to screw me over. You're lying, she screamed hysterically. I sneered and turned to the lead detective. Detective, I suggest you open an immediate investigation into Mark Peterson and Jessica Reed. The fact that they were so eager to point the finger at me makes it hard not to suspect they were the ones who transferred the $15 million. Just then, the two young officers who had left earlier returned with the evidence confirming my alibi. Jessica suddenly lunged toward the lead detective. Officer, it has to be Ethan's accomplice. He deliberately created an alibi. The detective pushed her away in disgust. Ms. Reed, I suggest you watch what you say. I slowly walked over to Mark and looked down at him. Director Peterson, where were you at 9 p.m. last night? Mark's eyes darted around. I was at home. Really? I turned to Jessica. Then why did Ms. Reed just say you were with her? Jessica's face went pale. I must have remembered it wrong. Slap. I suddenly backhanded Mark across the face, sending him stumbling. You son of a bitch, you hit me? He roared, clutching his cheek. So what if I did? I hit him again with my other hand. That one was for the company. Mark stumbled backward from the blows until he hit the wall. The detectives just watched, not making any move to intervene. The sun was bright when I finally left the station. The police had given me a stern lecture for hitting Mark and Jessica, and I'd almost ended up back in a cell. Luckily, when my father bailed me out this time, I didn't refuse. Mark and Jessica were forbidden from leaving the country and were placed under surveillance. The department had already formed a special task force to investigate them. The moment we got in the car, Chloe wrapped her arms around me and held on tight, refusing to let go. My parents just smiled, relieved, and didn't say a word. I gently patted Chloe's back, feeling her body tremble slightly. Silly girl, I'm fine now, see? I tousled her hair. Chloe looked up, her eyes red. Ethan, do you have any idea how scared I was? My father cleared his throat, cutting her off. Let's talk when we get home. The drive home was a little strange. I found myself thinking about the Chloe from the original story. She was my stepsister, though we weren't related by blood and weren't even on the same birth certificate. Her biological mother passed away when she was very young, and my dad remarried her mom, creating our new family. The first time I met her, she was a shy little thing hiding behind her mother, peering out at my father and me with curious eyes. As we grew up together, we became a real family, and Chloe grew more and more attached to me. She followed me around like a little shadow, always there. The way she looked at me was always different. I gently pinched her cheek, and she blushed like a startled rabbit. Ethan, she protested softly, but she didn't pull away. My father glanced at us in the rearview mirror, looking like he wanted to say something but thought better of it. When we got home, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. Ethan, about you and Jessica. We're done, I said simply. She betrayed me. And Chloe. I know, I said quietly. My mother looked at me, surprised. She's in love with me, right? And not in a brother-sister way. I smiled faintly. My mother's eyes lit up. And you? I need some time to sort things out. Just then, my father coughed loudly from the other room. Ahem, what are you two talking about in there? My mother excitedly grabbed his arm. Honey, you were right. My father's expression shifted from shock to relief. This was something I had been avoiding for a long time. If I hadn't been trying to run from it, I never would have agreed to be set up with Jessica and gotten engaged after only 2 months. 3 days later, my father's voice boomed from the living room. Ethan, the police are on the phone. I walked quickly into the room, and he handed me the phone. Mr. Hayes, this is Detective Zhang with the Economic Crimes Division. It was the lead detective. Congratulations. You've been completely cleared of all suspicion. My hand tightened around the phone. He explained that Mark's car had been spotted on a traffic camera near the office around the time of the crime. When questioned, neither he nor Jessica could produce a credible alibi. Furthermore, both of their parents had recently received payments of $100,000. They couldn't explain where the money came from, as it was far beyond what Mark and Jessica could have earned legitimately. To avoid the police uncovering more evidence, the two of them had made a run for it. They had shaken the officers tailing them and, using disguises, had nearly made it across the border. Luckily, they were caught less than 100 miles from their destination. After hanging up, I let out a long, deep breath. Chloe was standing behind me. She gently tugged on my sleeve. Ethan, is it all over? She looked up at me, her eyes shining like they were full of starlight. I reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. My fingertips grazed her warm skin, and she flinched almost imperceptibly. Yeah, it's all over. This must have been really hard on you. Her eyelashes fluttered, casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. Not at all. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. My parents exchanged a knowing glance and quietly left the living room, leaving the two of us alone. The atmosphere suddenly felt charged. Chloe's ears turned a faint shade of pink, and she started fiddling with the hem of her shirt. Ethan, do you want some water? She asked, her voice as light as a feather. Sure, I nodded, watching her scurry toward the kitchen like a startled fawn. A month later, the city's largest financial crime case in recent history came to a close. On the day of the trial, I sat in the back row, holding Chloe's hand. In the courtroom, Mark and Jessica stood pale and drawn in the defendant's box, listening as the judge read their sentences. Convicted on multiple counts, fraud, perjury, embezzlement, illegal border crossing, and money laundering, Mark, as the primary conspirator, was sentenced to life in prison. Jessica received a sentence of 12 years. Less than half of the stolen money was ever recovered. Our poor boss was nearly ruined, his company barely surviving. There was one piece of good news for me, though. I thought the $50,000 I had in savings was gone forever. But to my surprise, the police managed to recover $30,000 of it. The day the money was deposited into my account, Chloe was more excited than I was. She fluttered around the living room like a happy little bird. "Ethan, we can finally renovate the old house." Her eyes were sparkling as she counted on her fingers. "We can get a bigger bookshelf for your room, and we can plant flowers in the yard." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Chloe," I said her name suddenly. She turned, tilting her head. "I sold my old condo. After paying off the mortgage, I had about $40,000 left over," I said softly. Her eyes went wide, her lips parting slightly. "So you have $70,000 now." I smiled and shook my head, pulling a bank card from my pocket and handing it to her. "Not 70,000, I said. "It's 120,000. Chloe froze. She took the card carefully, her fingertips trembling. What is this?" "It's for Mom and Dad." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "They said, the other 50,000 is the money your mother left for you." Chloe's face instantly turned the color of a ripe apple. I don't understand." "You will someday," I said, smiling as I patted her head. Blushing, Chloe pouted and mumbled, so quietly I could barely hear. "So, when are we?" I gently tapped her on the forehead. "What are you thinking about?" "Ow." Chloe rubbed the spot I'd tapped, her eyes glistening like a sad little bunny's. "Ethan." She drew out my name, her voice impossibly soft and sweet. I couldn't help but ruffle her hair again. "Silly girl." Chloe's face flushed a deep red all the way to her ears. She spun around to run away. "I am going to go help Mom with dinner."